Mallory, we mentioned that we are going way out west, like way out west. We're heading out to the 915, and when we're going to talk about El Paso football, no one better to bring in than sports anchor and reporter for KVIA, Miss Rachel Phillips. Rachel, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. And yes, we're going way out west, but it couldn't be better.
You're not wrong. And I want to okay, so we'll give you this backstory and then you get to give us a backstory. On this show, a big thing that we love to do is to make sure that people have the opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves. And when you talk, you got a little bit of an accent, girl. How in the world, tell us where you're from and how in the world you ended up in El Paso, Texas.
No accent whatsoever. Come on. Nah, I'm from Australia, and I honestly ask myself every day how I ended up here in El Paso. No, I studied at Arizona State just kind of for fun. Why not go to another side of the world and study, and then applied for jobs and got offered a job here in El Paso and thought, why not?
I absolutely love that. So, when you went to Arizona State, where it was broadcasting your main goal, was that what you were hoping to be able to do?
Yeah, I did my master's in sports journalism. My undergrad wasn't in journalism at all, and I kind of realized I wanted to do journalism, so just figured, go get a master's degree and get into it from there.
So not only are you not from this state, you're not from this country originally. We are very proud in Texas, as I'm sure that you know now, of our Texas high school football. And, the best high school football in the nation is what we say. What was your first impression when you got to El Paso and saw how big high school football is here in the great state of Texas?
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, I'd watched Friday Night Lights before, so I felt like I kind of had a little bit of a clue in. I know it's a TV show, but I felt like I had a little bit of a clue in. But coming out here and actually seeing it for myself, it's something else. And I mean, I went to some practices the other week that were midnight practices, and I'm like, what on earth? Like that would never fly in Australia, not at all. Like it's almost like a professional sport. That's how it's treated here. That's how it looks anyway.
You're not wrong. And you mentioned you've been going out to these practices. You've really got your hand on the pulse of what El Paso football is going to look like heading into this 2022 season. Obviously, El Paso football it's a beast within its own, where it means a lot to the people out there in El Paso. When you go to these games, when you talk to these kids, how much does this sport mean to them?
Oh, for sure. I mean, they're so loud and proud out here. We're doing something new at Channel 7 where I work this year. I'm going out and anchoring a sports cast during our Fridays at 6 p.m. And I put out a vote to get kind of viewers to vote on which game I should go to. And we had just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people vote as to which game I should be at. Like, it's nuts. These people, like I said, it's treated like a professional sport. They are diehard fans. When I was out of these midnight practices, there are like the stands are packed. I'm like, it's midnight. What are you guys doing here? But that's how much it means to them. I mean, whether they're watching their kids, their grandkids, or they grew up and went to that school and they want to see that school do well, like people are proud out here. And there are some good rivalries too.
That is awesome. So moving into what we can expect to see out of El Paso football when it comes to on the field, for anyone in the state of Texas that's listening, give us some of the things, the storylines that you think will be the defining kind of storylines for football in the 915 heading into the 2022 season.
Yeah, of course. I mean, honestly, this is probably one of the best caliber of players we have had in years. We've got 5 players already committed to D1 schools going into the season, and I expect to see a few more kind of come out of it as the season goes on as well. So that in itself is pretty cool. Then you got 3 teams who went to playoffs last year in Canateo, Riverside, and Eastwood. They all made it to the Sweet 16, and I've spoken to all of those teams. And let me tell you, they are ready to go further and take it to the rest of those Texas teams. They want to go hard out there. But I think some teams to watch, which will be kind of cool, that didn't make it to the playoffs last year, will be Pebble Hills. They had a really young team last year, but they've got 14 of their starters returning this year. And then probably one of the best quarterbacks we have in El Paso and Gail Ochoa. So I expect them to have a really good run this season. And I'd be surprised if they don't end up making it to playoffs, or at least rival some of those teams that kind of went to playoffs last year. They're actually playing Canateo in this first round game here on Friday night at 7 p.m. over at Canateo. So that game in itself is going to be kind of a set the tone game. Canateo obviously going to the playoffs last year. And you got Pebble Hills who are pushing for that this year. I think we'll kind of get a really good eye as to kind of where those two teams stand. And then another team to kind of watch out for would be Parkland. They've got a new coach in Lane McWhirter. He's got a lot of experience, I think over 20, 30 years of experience coaching, but this is his first head coaching role. And then he's got 15 stars returning, including
Wow.
2 Power 5 commits in DJ Crest and Tyrone McDuffie. So I think that team as well, there's a lot of potential there for them to do something special.
I'll actually be at that Pebble Hills and Canutillo game tomorrow night. So are you going to be
Oh,
there?
cool. I will not be there. No, the public voted for me to go to a different game, so I won't be there. I'll be at East-Leda and Riverside.
Oh, that'll still be a good game. Good game.
Yeah, it should be a good game.
So you mentioned a couple of those players that are obviously standouts, some at Canutillo, some at Pebble Hills. What are some of the players that you have seen maybe in this offseason that might fly under people's radar a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Gail Ochoa, who's at Pebble Hills, people know about him, but he's not LJ Martin. Like everyone knows about LJ Martin, right? But Gail Ochoa kind of a little bit more under the radar. Him and as well as the pair at Riverside and Angel Munoz and Jose Quintano, the two of them, they're lethal together. They're running back and QB combo. They've been playing together since they were in 7th grade. And so when I talked to them, they just said, like, we know each other like the back of our hands. We're pretty much the same player. So when we're out there on the field, like, we just know what each other's doing. And I think that's going to be really cool to see because they're now in their senior season looking to kind of make something happen and with a really good Riverside team. So I think those two will be really cool to watch. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up committing to some D1 schools as well.
Obviously, a ton of outstanding rivalries out there. Just, I mean, really your pick of the litter. Which game and the atmosphere around the game do you get most excited for every time the season rolls around?
Well, honestly, this game that I'm going to on Friday, we've got East-Leda versus Riverside. It's the Battle of the Lower Valley, and I would probably say people in the Lower Valley are probably the proudest in El Paso. And some people might come at me for that, but I'm going with it. They are ridiculous, and they were some of the teams that had midnight practices, and that battle, like, people were very keen on their team winning. So I that one I'm pretty keen for, and I've already been invited to a few tailgates before the games. I think that in itself says it's going to be a pretty big game, and there's a lot of passion on the line.
Absolutely. A couple more questions here. One of which I want to get your take on this. Obviously, you know, teams like Eastwood, they tend to make their way across the state, specifically in non-district play. This year, they're starting out the season heading all the way really over into our neck of the woods in South Lake Carroll in the DFW. How does everyone around El Paso feel about those players getting the opportunity to kind of break out of that El Paso bubble and travel to the other parts of the states? Obviously, incredibly long road trips, but really competition that they might not be able to find right in their backyard.
Yeah, I think honestly probably other teams are a little jealous at Eastwood of getting that experience. It's crucial. I mean, they're a team that wants to make the playoffs again. They want to do their Sweet 16 run again. And so by playing these like big teams like South Lake Carroll this early on in the season, they really get a kind of indicator of where they stand and what they need to do to make sure that they're there come the end of the season. And I mean, they were on a bus. I think they were getting on a bus at like 11 p.m. last night. I saw them kind of loading up. So, I mean, they've got the travel ahead of them, but I mean, that prepares them because come playoffs time as well, if they do make it, they've got to travel out that way. You know, the playoffs they're not being played here. So, I mean, it's great experience, not only for the caliber of players, but even just getting ready for that kind of road trip and being prepared. And I think, honestly, from a team standpoint too, how can that not bring you together and get you hyped for the season?
Absolutely.
And obviously, there's a lot of El Paso teams out there that you have to cover from 6A all the way down to 6-man football. Are there any teams that you are seeing that you think, hey, I think they're going to make it all the way to AT&T Stadium? To state championship, yeah.
That's a big question. I mean, if I had to pick one team out of all of our El Paso teams, I think I'm going with Riverside.
Really? Okay.
I think they've got a really good shot this season. Like I said, they got tons of stars returning, and that combo at QB and running back, and then Coach Gary Ricotta out there. They're a really passionate team, and I know they're hungry after last season. They want to go further. I think I'd say Pebble Hills too are a shot. But it's big because, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I believe in these El Paso teams, but you go to the rest of Texas, there are so many teams, and they're bigger. I think they're just bigger players in general, so which makes it tough. I mean, it's just I was talking to the Canutillo head coach the other day, and he was saying, you know, once you get into that second round, everyone's good. Like, everyone's good, but we want to be better than them, but it's hard.
She's Rachel Phillips of KVIA. Rachel, we've got one more question here for you. This is absolutely the hardest question you'll have to answer. So I was telling Mallory, I made it out to El Paso twice last year, and my favorite restaurant that I had when I was out there was Ellen J's.
That was the first restaurant I was ever taken to in El Paso.
And is it
All
not
right.
fantastic?
All right, I'm sold.
It is great. It is great.
So I told her, I was
Not a
like,
fan?
you have to go to J.'s. So she's been tasked with going to J.'s. I was like, I don't care what else you do out there, but you have to go to J.'s. So besides J.'s, what other restaurant recommendations would you give folks around the state of Texas when they make their way out to the 915?
Yeah, is a good one because you get a good mix of everything. But I think if you want to stick with Mexican, Leo's is pretty high up there. I'm a big fan of that one. Great margaritas too, if you like to have a good drink.
Taking notes as we
Girl
speak.
after our own heart.
Yeah, I know. I am Australian, so you know.
Too great. She is Rachel Phillips of KVIA. You can follow her on Twitter at Rachel_KVIA. Rachel, man, we appreciate you so much. And hopefully Mallory will be able to swing by and say hi at some point this weekend.
Yeah, I'd love that. For sure. Hit me up.
There she goes, Rachel Phillips out of KVIA in the El Paso and Las Cruces areas. Really appreciate her joining us on the accent. Exceptional. The wealth of knowledge about football out there. Exceptional. She's fantastic.
It's
I'm a
so
huge
good.
Rachel Phillips fan.
I want to know if now this happened with my uncle too, because he's from New Zealand, and so when he first came over here, it was really hard to understand what he was saying because the accent was so thick. So and it was super easy to understand her. So I wonder when she first came over here if there was kind of a bit of a language barrier between her and maybe some folks in El Paso or even in Arizona or something like that.
Right, yeah. Well, and it's funny because obviously when you think about going and doing broadcasting you'll notice this with a lot of like baseball reporters. There's a lot of baseball players that their primary language is Spanish. And so a lot of very successful baseball player or baseball broadcasters, whether that be sideline reporters or on-air talent in the booth and stuff, they're fluent in Spanish. So that way they can do it. So you obviously Australians are speaking English, but the difference in broadcasting clear and concise is something that anyone has to work on, much less with an accent. I think, she's awesome. But yeah, the unbelievable insight there from Rachel Phillips on the state of El Paso football. And so very excited for that.